Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, dear guests, once again, welcome to the session on Global Climate Action High-Level event at COP27, focusing on making good on our promises. Before we get started, I would like to recognize Sameh, Shoukry, the COP27 President, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Mr. Stiell, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary, Dr. Mahmoud, Mohieldin, the UN High-Level Climate Change Champion of COP27, Mr. Nigel, the UN High-Level Climate Change Champion of COP26. I would also like to recognize all of you high-level participants in the room. We are here on the background of a lot of challenges, issues around making good on our promises. And in order for us to deliver and to keep hope alive, we need to, one, speak on honesty, credibility, and accountability. Take a look at our global stocktake and the progress. Two, show any implementation and action that is already being done, mostly by non-state actors, and demonstrate that success. And thirdly, craft a vision for the future with a multi-stakeholder, multi-pronged approach, recognizing the impact of non-state actors in ensuring implementation and delivery around climate action. I particularly liked that His Excellency Shoukry recognized the role of non-state actors and civil society in driving the loss and damage agenda during the opening ceremony. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will join us in jest and in hope in welcoming His Excellency Sameh Shoukry, the COP27 President and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Minister.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. This afternoon we are honored to have with us Mr. Stiell, UNFCCC Executive Secretary, Mr. Nigel, COP26 High-Level Champion, Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin, COP27 High-Level Champion. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the COP27 Global Climate Action High-Level event. Let me take this opportunity to share some reflections on the importance of the role of non-party stakeholders in implementing climate action and enhance ambition. COP27 is a unique, inclusive, multilateral arena bringing together party and non-party stakeholders, including cities, subnational regions, businesses, investors, and civil society. The COP27 presidency is fully aware that climate change is not only a challenge to governments. All non-state actors have to adjust and to adapt to the new realities imposed by climate change and to be part of the solutions needed to address it. Indeed, the support and contributions of non-governmental actors are crucial to achieving the desired success at Sharm el-Sheikh. We are all driven by the unity of purpose, reflected in the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, but also in many of the achievements of the high-level champions and the Marrakesh Partnership. I commend their important role in encouraging and mobilizing the actions of non-state actors. It is vital to build upon and push forward the existing intensive level of dialogue and practical interaction with all non-state actors across the globe to enhance their positive contribution to global climate action. The COP27 presidency was key to integrate the voices of non-state actors across all thematic days within the presidency's program. Furthermore, we were keen to consult with the climate champions and various non-state actors in the context of preparing the presidency's initiatives launched during COP27. Recognizing that progress towards adapting to climate consequences and enhancing resilience is crucially needed, the COP27 presidency has been constructively working with the champions and the Marrakesh Partnership to produce the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda, and I am pleased to launch today. This agenda portrays a total of 30 global adaptation outcomes, which targets by 2030 that are urgently needed to address adaptation gap and increase resilience of 4 billion people through accelerating transformation across the impact systems: food and agriculture, water and nature, coastal and oceans, human settlements and infrastructure. Furthermore, it includes enabling solutions for planning and finance. It is our aspiration that the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda represents a significant contribution to enhancing global action on adaptation and resilience as an utmost priority. I would like to seize this opportunity to call upon all parties and non-party stakeholders to get behind this crucial agenda. It is the firm conviction of the COP27 presidency that non-party stakeholders need not only be part of the discussion, but part of the action. We are looking forward to hear in the next days within the Global Climate Action Marrakesh Partnership Program what action is happening in the real world, and to demonstrate that it is essential for parties and non-party stakeholders to work together on solutions to combat climate change in order to realize on the ground the slogan for COP27, Together for Implementation. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now would like to welcome the Executive Secretary, Mr. Sameh.
Mr. President, colleagues, thank you for convening here for what will be a valuable, instructive, and encouraging opening to this Global Climate Action segment. This is the first time I address this Global Climate Action segment, a crucial part of the conference that brings together the transformations that are happening on the ground from all actors and all areas of economies and society. I must start by commending the work of the high-level champions, Nigel and Mahmoud, especially their leadership in mobilizing action by non-party stakeholders through the Marrakesh Partnership and facilitating radical collaboration between the parties. We'll hear at this COP about turning ambition into results, lifting promises off the page, getting from intentions to implementation. We'll hear about the importance of accountability, of transparency, and why human needs must be at the heart of everything we do. This mantra is reverberating in these halls. Implementation, implementation, implementation. I want to talk about what I think delivery of implementation means. Delivery is not a singular moment. Delivery is a compilation of many moments added together that make change. That is to say, delivery does not start and end over these 2 weeks. Delivery is about infusing the essence of climate action into the hearts and minds of every single one of the 8 billion of us. This includes our hearts and minds that drive us as individuals must be constantly making choices which have climate action at their core. We need to transform every sector of our economies and do it rapidly. So while these discussions may represent a good start, it's only the beginning of our journey. It's a journey that requires different mindsets, one the Egyptian presidency has captured well in terms of their vision for COP27. One that moves us away from thinking about the formal and informal processes, that they're somehow mutually exclusive, and towards getting the formal stream to flow with the informal stream, so that they're moving in one powerful direction. That means bringing credibility and accountability. This includes ensuring everyone follows through on their promises. The Global Climate Action Portal is instrumental to that. Parties tasked us to deliver the portal, and we did. We will look forward to getting from tracking pledges to measuring implementations and outcomes. To do so, we need clear standards to assess the net zero commitments of non-state actors and measure progress. And this means progress on your part. I urge you to use this event and the next few days to begin bridging our existing gaps, seizing the opportunities that await us, and establishing a clear and credible process to put all climate action on the track that science has identified and that humanity and nature demands. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. I would like now to invite the Master of Ceremony, Mr. Bogolo, who will lead us to the second session of the event, moving to the non-party side. Please, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bogolo Kenewendo, and I am a Special Advisor and Africa Director for the UN Climate Champions. And it is indeed my greatest honor to be guiding your session here today. And in recognizing the kind words of encouragement from the COP27 presidents and the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, I would like now to call upon a young voice to get us started, and I am delighted to welcome an inspiring young climate activist to address us basing on her experience of running an international non-profit with over 8,000 volunteers in 40+ countries. She is also the youngest member of the inaugural United Nations Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change, and she is here to share with us her perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, please do welcome Sophia Kianni.
When it comes to climate action, some governments and business leaders are saying one thing, but doing another. Simply put, they are lying. Those are not my words, or the words of another youth climate activist. No. Those are the words of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. A year ago in Glasgow, Vanessa Nakate, a Ugandan climate activist, stood on a stage like this and said that young people around the world do not believe in the promises being made by world leaders at every COP. But she begged you to prove us wrong. In response, leaders made bold promises to finally act and left Glasgow claiming that they had kept 1.5 alive. But keeping 1.5 alive requires that we have no new gas, oil, or coal development. These are not the demands of a youth activist. That's a 2021 assessment by the International Energy Agency. It's a year later, and hundreds of new oil and gas leases have been released by some of the richest nations on the planet. Through their actions, politicians and business leaders are killing any hope at preserving 1.5. Last week's UNEP emissions gap report showed us that even if all the promises which governments have made were kept, we would still be on track for a global temperature rise of between 2.4 to 2.0 degrees Celsius. The plans are woefully inadequate. Again, those are not my words. Those are the words of the United Nations Environmental Program. 7 years after the Paris Climate Agreement, there is still not a single country that has a climate commitment compatible with 1.5. Meanwhile, over 7 million people are dying prematurely every single year from breathing toxic air from the burning of fossil fuels. Those are not the words of a youth activist. Those are the words of the World Health Organization. If the world took the action to meet WHO air quality guidelines, we would save millions of lives, $8 trillion, and drive real climate action. But what do leaders do? They keep greenwashing. They keep making excuses for not taking action. They keep lying. So on top of the emissions gap, we have an honesty gap. There is a widening rift between what leaders say and what they do, which is why we are here today. To define what real action is. To stop leaders from being able to say one thing and do another. To prevent leaders from being able to create loopholes, create accounting, and lies. Lies and more lies. With my nonprofit, Cardinals, I work with over 9,000 young people from around the world who are volunteering their time to help translate the most important climate reports into languages beyond the official 6 UN languages. And we do that because so many of the people on the front lines of the climate crisis don't speak one of the 6 UN official languages. We take time out of our own studies to do this because we believe that language must not be a barrier for people to take action on climate change. So I have one question for the government and business leaders at COP27. What language do we need to translate the climate data into for you to take action? Please tell us. Is there a secret leader's language that we don't know about? Because I have to believe the only reason that you are not taking climate action at the pace and scale required is that you do not have the information. Because if you did have the information and you were only pretending to take action, that would be unforgivable. Or in the words of Secretary General Guterres, that would be lying. We need leaders to stop lying. Or, as our youth volunteers translated for me, in Arabic, kafan il kadhib, stop lying. Or in Mandarin, Tinge Chouahon, stop lying. Or in French, arrête de mentir. Or Russian, prekrativat. Or Spanish, deja de mentir. Whatever the language, we need leaders to stop lying. Start taking real action. And start right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, with your call to action. I now have the utmost pleasure to introduce and call to the podium Dr. Mohieldin, who is the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion of COP27, to give us a keynote reflecting upon, of course, the global climate action agenda as it gets underway in COP27. And let us know what it is that we mean by making good on our promises. Dr. Mohieldin.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Shoukry, Mr. Stiell, my good friend, Nigel topping. Let me just start after these powerful words by Sophia, by my background from a village in the Egyptian Delta. When we take men for their words, not for what they write in contracts or what they promise and they don't deliver. So this matters a lot to my village and to my neighborhood, either from my side in the Egyptian Delta or even my tougher side from Upper Egypt, where my grandmother is from. So one respects really people's words, but we have actually the habit as well in my village to spend our time in riddles. And I have one for you. What is inefficient, insufficient, and unfair? Before you think it would be many things, but it's basically our climate and development finance architecture that is fitting this bill. It is unfair because it takes for many years until you get the money that you agree on dispersed and allocated. It is unfair as well because of the cost of borrowing. It's inefficient because of the time and the higher transaction costs compared to the developed world, and insufficient because in whatever numbers that we're talking about, including the famous $100 billion, even if they are fulfilled, and they never were, they are only no more than 3% of the requirements of climate action finance as it should be flowing from the advanced economies to the developing economies. With the climate champions team, I've been working hard during the last few months. Like to recognize the leadership of the Egyptian presidency of the COP and the UK presidency as well. It's a partnership between state and non-state actors, and without this fruitful and effective partnership, wouldn't be in position today to deliver on what we are promising today, that we should be working hard in the coming year as part of our mandate of the COP27 to fulfill. Minister Shoukry announced the launching of the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda. Congratulations for that. This is a very important initiative, and I know that Bogolo is encouraging us to commend this initiative, so I'd like to join in this. And everybody from Africa, from rural areas, from those who are suffering from lack of finance to agriculture, to food system, to supporting the cities and villages exposed to climate shocks. I think they would appreciate that, especially if they are going to be implemented with adequate finance. And here at the end, when it comes to new initiatives, and the Minister-elect mentioned the areas of priority as first the comprehensive global plan to rally both state and non-state actors together to work on food impact systems, agriculture, water and nature, coastal and oceans, human settlements and infrastructure, and including enabling solutions for planning and finance. Where is the money going to be coming from? We see that the private sector is doing a better job now in mitigation, and this only needs to be de-risked in some countries. And we can see really more solar plants, more wind farms, more decarbonization efforts, and more projects in green hydrogen. Adaptation, last updates on Africa and globally, the share of the private sector is no more than 2 to 3%. This needs to change, and it will not change without partnerships, and that includes not just the public and the private sector, but the good work of philanthropists and those who are able to mitigate risks. I won't take much of your time. If it is the question about finance, what we should really be doing beyond the 100 billion. COP26, COP27, with the support of our team, from the champions, we managed to have a good report that I encourage you all to read on what we should be doing on the areas of finance for climate action and for development at large. There is no contradiction or trade-off between climate and development. Climate action is development action, climate finance is development finance, and the work led by Vera Songwe and Professor Stern and their team, which is being launched today and tomorrow, is going to prove this by evidence, but is giving us a big task as well on how to implement it. But we are more and more dependent on debt instruments. We need to have more private equity participation. I'm happy to say that the GFANs announced with Glasgow, this is where the G is coming from, of the GFANs, but it's going to have a chapter, a strong chapter that has already started work in Africa to implement what we have been working hard in cooperation with the presidency of COP27 and the UN system through Regional Economic Commission, that we have now a pipeline of implementable, financeable and investable projects covering all areas of adaptation and mitigation, and they are going all to be presented in a compendium during our work in the coming days here in Sharm el-Sheikh as examples of what can the finance promise be meeting the project pipeline. We are working hard as well to enhance the understanding and the new innovations on debt swaps, debt reduction mechanisms, linking them to climate investment and nature investment. And there are many examples from Belize and Seychelles, but now more recently from Barbados is a great example linking indices to KPIs and how to bring finance closer, including to middle income countries. We're working hard on that. This very day, we started it with my good standing friend here, started it with the launching of an initiative on carbon credit market for Africa, attended by 4 presidents from Africa today and many ministers, with a promise to get financial innovation to serve not just the rich but the poor where they live, with emphasis on localization. The final point I'd like to share is basically, when we talk about finance, we need to be careful when it comes to integrity, regulatory frameworks, and avoiding greenwashing. And in a few minutes, we supported the work led by the Secretary General, and he commissioned Minister McKenna, the former Minister of Environment and Climate of Canada, with a big group of experts to give us a stock take of what worked and what didn't, and what could be the standards to be pursued in order to minimize greenwashing. At the end of the day, yes, I agree with Mr. Stiell. It's really implementation, but you'll always find a question where is the finance, where is the funding, where are the project opportunities for development, and that all gets together in an implementation COP. That I hope it will be redundant for what would be lasting for many years as solving problems of this world and the people during the most difficult of times since the Second World War. Having said that, I'm very grateful for this opportunity and encourage all while we're working hard, don't forget to see how beautiful this country is and how beautiful this city is. Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed.
I'd just like to thank Mahmoud. I really thank Nigel for all of the excellent work they're doing. Their commitment has been invaluable. Let me tell you, as President, I highly appreciate the parties, but I really feel the vibes of this community, the non-party actors, and I can only encourage you to continue with the same level of commitment, enthusiasm, dedication, exuberance. This is, I think, what will keep the parties honest and true to their commitments, and I do appreciate the disappointment that was conveyed by Sophia. It's a disappointment that is well-founded, and it is up to us to shoulder the responsibility of proving her wrong. And if we don't, then she will come back and scold us once again. As President, I hope that her voice will be heard across the parties. I really would have loved to have stayed for the duration of this meeting. Other engagements necessitate that I leave, but I do leave you with that spirit. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
May I just ask, with the permission of the moderator, that all of the team of the climate champion stand up in the presence of His Excellency the Minister, just to, his thanks are to you, not to me and Nigel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you, Dr. Mohieldin. Now I'm going to rush it through into the next section of this event and call on to stage Ms. Shemara Wikramanayake. You know, if I can't get Kenewendo, then I don't know. Similar. Please, Shemara on stage, and Raj Shah. Kindly join us on stage, and Dr. Mohieldin, if you can join me for the fireside chat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome to the stage, to the fireside chat. I only really have one question for both of you. We, upon reflection of Dr. Mohieldin's presentation, call to action for unlocking finance and the role of the private sector philanthropy, and for us to work around the ambition that is science-based, that focuses on development and sustainable livelihoods. What do you think we should do, and how can we unlock more financing for the needs that we currently have, and in order to deal with this gap that we have? So for you, Shemara, how can we make good on these promises of delivering on finance towards the ambitions?
Can you hear me? Right, thanks. Well, look, as we all know, we're falling short in terms of the targets we had for taking emerging markets and developing countries on this journey of climate response. We're probably 10% of what we're needing to flow at the moment, and 1% of what we need to be happening by 2030. But what we have done with the Global Financial Alliance on Net Zero is decided to focus on country platforms to get this happening, because we can't boil the ocean in terms of attracting funding. And even though it's accelerated over the last 5 years, in the last 12 months with everything happening in global issues, with rising inflation, interest rates, the energy crisis, the funding has slowed to developing economies and is going back to the developing world because people are perceiving too much risk relative to the return. So with our country platforms, what we're trying to do is design a glide path for each specific country and bring together the governments of those countries, of the developing economies, in terms of setting frameworks, policy structures, etc., together with the MDBs in terms of taking first loss capital or guarantees that are required, or FX protection, together with private sector funding from areas like philanthropies but global investors once we've de-risked the project, together with local partners to bring a project pipeline and capital to try and deliver projects. That is challenging, and I'm happy to keep elaborating as we speak, but we started with India as our first country finance leadership initiative and brought a bunch of 9 private sector people together there, and I can talk about the progress there. We're moving on to Colombia and Indonesia with these kind of finance leadership initiatives, and we also have the JET-P partnerships running in places like South Africa, Vietnam, Indonesia. In fact, the funding was just announced for the South African JET-P. So I'll let others comment, but I'm happy to elaborate on. Ultimately, we just got to put our heads down and start driving solutions country by country, project by project. And hopefully, as has been our experience in terms of infrastructure development in these countries, it catapults after you get to a basic early momentum.
Shemara, and Raj, from a philanthropic point of view, how can we catalyse more philanthropists to be part of this action and making good on the promises?
Well, I think first, thank you. It's great to be here, and I appreciate Shemara's comments just now. The answer to your question is building alliances and implementing the commitments we make in those alliances. And I, too, was taken by Sophia's comments earlier. I have a 14-year-old daughter myself who was asking me as I was coming here, does any of this actually matter? And the answer is it only matters if we follow up on what we say we're doing and deliver results and outcomes. And I'll give you one example. We try to address and create and accelerate energy transitions country after country. And we all know since 2009, there simply has not been real flows of capital to emerging and developing economies to support that energy transition. So last year, the Rockefeller Foundation, together with 18 other partners, announced an $11 billion collaboration called the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet to reach 1 billion people who don't have access to effective renewable electrification with power. A year later, we've spent $340 million of that money. That has unlocked $3 to $4 billion from our partners. We're active in 12 countries. We will be in 20 countries as of next year. And we're starting that movement that has the capacity over time to accelerate energy transitions in all 81 countries that house the 3.6 billion people on Earth who are held back, who economically cannot advance because of insufficient access to energy, and to whom we are all saying that the world will only achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius if you, those 81 countries, commit to allowing their growth to be driven by renewable energy and renewable energy technology. So that's one example of just making a commitment, following up, and seeing it through. I want to highlight something that was said earlier, that Mahmoud said earlier, which is that's a small example. If we're going to actually succeed at scale, I think we have to embrace initiatives like the Bridgetown Initiative, which was referenced in your comments, and actually transform and modernize a financial system that was set up after World War II to support Western Europe's reconstruction and to prevent the collapse of economies during debt and currency crises. We need to transform that system. We need to do it now. There's an actionable plan to do it that will unlock hundreds of billions of dollars of new liquidity for for developing economies. We need to apply real political pressure to make sure that happens in 2023.
Thanks, Raj. Very interesting perspective. One, that's one aggressive growth in 1 year following the announcement in COP26. So real change being driven by non-state actors. What you mentioned now around the current financial system not really working for developing countries, we are now in what I think a precipice of the green financial infrastructure. Now, for both of you, how do you think we should be positioning developing countries in order to benefit more? For example, the continent only gets about 3% of climate finance at the moment. What should we do to make sure that we get more of the pie, given the 16% of our population we have in comparison to the rest of the world? Raj?
I'll start with that, and then I look forward to Shemara's comments because she's in a very unique role to drive those capital flows. 3% of public climate finance, only 5% of total foreign direct investment goes to Africa. And if we're being quite honest, you're not going to have dollar-denominated or euro-denominated investment capital drive climate transitions through Africa at broad scale. That's why we know the needs are in the trillions of dollars. I want to highlight one additional constraint, which is more than 40 countries around the world, many in sub-Saharan Africa, are already teetering on the edge of a debt crisis. Right now, as we talk about investing in these economies, private capital is moving out of these economies to safer settings during the global economic period of turbulence that is a real headwind for this aspiration. That's why we all came together and crafted the Bridgetown Initiative. And it's actually very straightforward. It's helping the IMF change the way it does debt sustainability analysis so that people understand to actually develop a country in the face of climate change, you need decades, not 5 years. It provides more liquidity and more low-cost public concessional debt capital and grant money to countries through special drawing rights and changing the way the World Bank and the other multilateral development banks use their balance sheet. So countries can see through this crisis, invest in their people, and invest in their economies. And finally, it adopts some important concepts around loss and damage that allow us to recognize that when a massive storm wipes out an economy like Barbados, they should have a holiday for a number of years to rebuild their economy, invest in their people, as Prime Minister Miyamali has shown is possible, and do that in a way that allows for the sanctity of the debt arrangements to be carried out and held effective going forward. These are things, if we were designing the Bretton Woods architecture today, as opposed to 70, 80 years ago, we would have done this already. This is urgent, this should happen now, there's absolutely no excuse, and if we don't do it, we should have the next generation of youth activists should hold us accountable for trying to behave like World War II just ended, when in fact, we're facing an entirely different world out there.
Thanks, Raj. Shemara?
Yeah, well, look, sadly, there's no silver bullet. We're not going to, with the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, we've got now 550 financial institutions with $130 trillion committing to this journey to make things happen, but not much of that money has flowed to the emerging markets and developing economies because they ultimately are responsible for the savers of those nations who want appropriate return for risk. And they're perceiving very big risk here relative to the return. So I think we just have to get on the ground in those countries, creating structures to de-risk the investment to get this money to flow. And it is stuff like the Bridgetown Agreement and things that Ravi's talked about with MDBs, etc., DFIs coming to play to de-risk things like currency. But the countries as well have to take ownership for saying, here's our glide path, here's the framework and policy agendas we're going to put in place, and you can invest in this and get de-risking of your return, just to get the early money flowing, because once the private sector gets familiar, then it unlocks big pools of money. So, sadly, the early work, and we're doing a lot of it in the trenches, is you've just got to get on the ground, work with the glide path for each country. The work we're doing in India, we're looking at areas for their transition that are not covered at the moment by the government's overall plans. So areas like water recycling is very important. E-mobility for heavier, bigger vehicles is important. Things like grid infrastructure are important. Hydrogen, of course, is important. And we're trying to get those early pilot projects going. So we've done a lot of work with the Green Climate Fund in India on that e-mobility point for heavy vehicles, creating a financing structure where the capital costs are very high up front, but once you've gone running, they pay themselves off. So if we create a leasing structure where the Green Climate Fund's putting in 200 million of equity, we're matching them dollar for dollar with private equity, leveraging that up to $1.5 billion, transporting 13% of emissions in India. We'll get a couple of billion then in place to get this happening and hopefully catalyse the industry, and over 10 years we're aiming to take out 9.5 million tonnes. Now that is a drop in the ocean for India, but it's taken a lot of work to get this pilot project happening, and our view is we just need to get these done country by country, projects that can be leaders, I call them bell cow projects, to bring other money along. So there's no magic switch. We've just got to put our heads down and get on with project by project, creating investable opportunity, and it will snowball. We found it in other sectors.
I wish we had more time because there's so much to unpack in what you just said. And as we conclude, I want to tag your last words on project by project to Dr. Mohieldin. You and the champions, us, ran the regional forums, and we had a pipeline of projects. We're building on those. The capital markets event this morning was an outcome of that, and so will many others throughout COP27. As we wrap up, your call to action to those that control the money, that have the money, and that use the money.
Right, okay, thank you so much for getting me to be part of this panel. I was just wondering if I was going to get any question, or bringing me here just to enjoy this. Let's try, because it's much more comfortable than the one there. So Nigel, we might need to use it at some stage. Anyways, let me just, before I get into the project by project approach, I think 2 minutes, less than that. Raj mentioned something very useful here, and this is the new approach that we'll be seeing from countries from the south and the emerging markets. And you heard it this morning with the president of Kenya, that we're not just complaining that we're victims, but we provide solutions. This happened with the carbon credit market. This happened with the leadership of Prime Minister Mahmoud, that yes, we recognize the problems, and then in partnership, not in isolation, but in partnership with the advanced economy group, with the big players in the international financial system, with big philanthropies, we try to find something that can really get us out from the crises that we're suffering. Based on this, it's the offer of the GFANs that we have the money, where are the projects? And been talking to Nigel about this story of the camel and the camel rider, that you claim that you can ride camels, so bring camels to you. So it brought, during 4 months of hard work, and thanks to the team working with us and the regional economic commissions in the system, many of the private sector participants, many of the consultancy firms, including BCG and others. Now we have a compendium of projects that cover examples of investable projects. I'm saying investable because bankable alone will not work, because many countries, as we know, are suffering from debt crisis. So as much as we can have a better mix of finance, private equity participation, with long-term finance, with philanthropic contribution, in addition to having what we should be getting of long-term finance and debt as well, that we can really reach the outcomes of these promising projects, not just from Africa, but we have that from the rest of the regions as well. We started with Africa, it was very promising. It came with good byproducts as well that themselves are becoming main products, like the carbon credit markets, like the scaling up of the work on the debt swaps, like the other issues related to regulatory environment, having non-bank financial services, including capital markets, leasing and insurance companies. So this is the importance of partnership that goes through certain dynamics we're just there, to be honest, to have few projects to impress GFAN's members and to have a proper answer to what I called Mark Carney's list of questions. So he's very pleased. He did two things: sharing this compendium, and he asked us to have a chapter on Africa for GFANs to support the work that GFANs are doing, and we're happy to do that. I say we because we're Hamid Farid, the head of the Financial Regulatory Authority, and myself are responsible for this work with your support as well. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists. So I like to think about it we were reclaiming our time. But I know they're about to kill me for going over time. So next I would like to welcome Mr. Nigel Topping to take us through the last session of this event. Okay, let's get to the camera. All right. So Mr. Nigel Topping will just go straight to the panel, and I would like to welcome Yuriko, Koike to the stage, and Ms. Phuthi, Mahanyele-Dabengwa to also join us, and lastly Dumaliang to join us on the panel. I love this panel, it's a lot of women. Over to you.
Hello, thank you, Bogolo. Great to see everybody here. We know we're running over, but we're going to honour the time of the leaders we've got here. We're going to stick to these panels. Don't worry, we're not going to rush you off. I wanted to start just by reflecting on the extraordinary challenge that we're facing. It's been well described by many, and the fact that it's hard to keep hoping. You know, the Secretary General yesterday said that those who give up hope are sure to lose. So I just want to reflect on that. Although it's very hard to keep hoping, it requires an act of courage to dare to hope. It's easy to plummet into the despair. If we all despair, then there's no action from a place of despair, and then we will all lose. So this question is, how do we keep hope alive? It's not blind, naive hope. It's a hope that comes from the courage to take a decision to lead. We'll hear about that from our three non-sector leaders. And the confidence that we're amazing innovators when we really put our minds to it and can learn from each other. And the conviction that we can go much further and faster when we align and go together. But also the commitment to honestly assess whether we're really making progress or not, because we know if we kid ourselves in making progress, then we're kidding ourselves. We're lying to ourselves and to our children. So I take hope from the collective power that we see on the panel here, that actually is really present in ever greater numbers in the COPs. The Global Climate Action Index is going from strength to strength. There's real dynamism. I encourage everybody to go out and attend the Marrakesh Partnership events, visit all the amazing pavilions, the new youth pavilion, the resilience hub, all the thematic pavilions. But just to put in context the way that this momentum is building, and as Simon said, the difference between the formal and the informal, if you like, is blending. A couple of COPs ago in Madrid, the high-level champions were asking us with a plan for how we improve the way that non-state actors support the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So we launched a big campaign, The Race to Zero, to get as many people as we could in a science-based, rigorous, transparent way to commit to the long-term goal and the short-term actions needed to get us to zero. We launched the Race to Resilience that gathered partners to implement the solutions to improve the resilience of 4 billion people's lives. With Mark Carney's team, we launched the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero to start mobilising that wave of capital that Shemara has talked about. The Marrakesh Partnership then published a series of detailed pathways for every theme of the Marrakesh Partnership, how we get to net zero, and we consolidate that into some very simple 2030 targets we call the 2030 breakthroughs. That sets a very clear midterm goal that each sector of the economy needs to achieve, and it was picked up by the UK presidency in the Glasgow breakthroughs. We then packaged all that in a plan that we were asked to present, a 5-year plan that we presented to parties in Glasgow about how we collectively, all of us, can mobilise more ambition and more action from the non-party stakeholder community And now we're implementing that plan. This is the implementation clock, we're implementing that plan. Just very briefly, on finance, we've heard about Georeserve. Over 300 financial institutions by the end of this COP will have published their interim targets, so 2025, 2030 targets, when almost none had a couple of years ago. That is a precursor to a significant reallocation of capital. The banks that are publishing targets are saying that roughly, they're all slightly different of course, but in the power sector they'll reduce financed emissions by 60% by 2030 and oil and gas by 30%. That's a massive shift in the business model. On integrity, Sophia, you mentioned loopholes. We've gone through the third iteration of consultation on waste to zero criteria, closed a couple of loopholes. We think they were pretty clear anyway, but it's made absolutely clear. We now have 11,000 organisations in the race to zero, all will be disclosing their data on the Global Climate Action Portal Simon referred to. On regionalisation, Bogolo and the team and partners in Africa are doing an amazing job. African Carbon Markets Initiative, African Green Hydrogen Alliance, supporting AFR 100, launching a big African insurance initiative tomorrow. On adaptation, we're super excited, and I want to thank Wael and on behalf of the Minister Shoukry for the collaboration between the Presidency and the champions on this, I think, a breakthrough adaptation agenda which really lays out, again, like we did with mitigation last year, the very specific 2030 goals we can mobilise states and non-state actors around. And you know, so those of you who know me, I can't speak without talking about exponential change. I just want to also point to something which none of the reports which adult MDCs or current policies pick up. We are starting to see a shift towards exponential adoption of clean technologies from one technology after. Everyone talks about renewables, we're seeing it now in EVs, with adoption growing 63% per year, and it's more than doubling every 2 years. And we're starting to see that in Stiell. I'll give you a very little geeky example. We've said that the Stiell breakthrough is to get 150 million tonnes of green steel being produced by 2030 to put us on the track to zero by 2050. Right now, less than 1 million tonnes. So it sounds like a complete failure. But if you look at the project pipeline, there's projects, 36 projects, which add up to 60 million tonnes of green steel in various stages of approval. We think that pipeline is building, and that shows we're actually on track to the 150 million. You have to look a bit beneath the surface, and that's now a real dynamic with ministers of energy and steel and leaders and financiers around the world. I could go on. What I really want to do now is turn to our amazing panel and hear some stories of real witty leadership from the front lines of climate action from non-state actors. We're very lucky to have the Governor of Tokyo, Yuriko, the CEO of Naspers, Phuthi Mahanyele-Dabengwa, and the co-founder and managing trustee of Masungi, Georeserve, and Dumaliang. So welcome all. I want to explore a little bit your stories of leadership, and a little bit about where does your hope come from, but also hear your stories, because sharing stories is a great way of generating hope in others. Like, wow, if you can do that, maybe I can. That's one of the things I think that allows us to get more and more ambitious, is learning that other people have been pioneering. So Ms. Koike, I want to start with you. I'm so impressed with the way that sub-national governments in Japan have really led, as we call it, the ambition of really stepping up. But it's not just on mitigation, it's also on adaptation. And I'd love you to say a little bit about it. This is a massive city, the metropolitan city of Tokyo. I know you've got experience of national government in several ministerial roles as well. So tell us a little bit about how the actions that you're taking in a massive modern city like Tokyo are building resilience for the future. And maybe what do you think are some of the things that others can learn from to maybe go faster?
Well, Nigel, thank you very much for introducing me and giving me this opportunity to talk to you. And I have just participated in the World Leaders Summit Roundtable. And as a local government leader, I was the only one. But Tokyo, talking about the city of Tokyo, the size of population of 14 million and big enough, I think. But Cairo is 20 million, 20 million population. It's a big change. Wow. And also the size of economy is almost like, for instance, our annual budget is almost equal to the Sweden. So it's almost a country. And as I told you that I had just participated in the World Leaders Summit and talked about green hydrogen. And I spoke about the initiative Turkey is implementing, and these include the laying of hydrogen pipelines in the district where the Olympic and Paralympic Village, you remember that was taking place last year, although it was 2020 Olympic Games. Anyway, Olympic and Paralympic Village was located, and our plans to build a supply chain network, including trunk lines to receive green hydrogen from abroad. And I want to mention one thing that I can truly agree to the COP27 title, Climate Implementation Summit. I have participated in this climate change conference almost 3 times, discussing about the Kyoto Protocol. It sounds familiar, but I think this COP27 is really important to implement our policies into real. Otherwise, the crisis, climate security crisis, is so close, or we are in the middle of this crisis already. So there is no time to waste. And our title, as for Tokyo, City of Tokyo, we could use the title of Act Now, Time to Act. So I think Tokyo has also been affected by scorching summer heat and heavy rains, like everyone else. We witnessed so many natural disasters this year, and also plus Ukraine conflict. It's really caused the energy crisis much harder than before. In order to protect the lives and property of 14 million Tokyo residents, as I mentioned, and meet its responsibility as a major city, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, TMG, is taking strategic action for both tangible and intangible aspects in terms of adaptation measures to achieve net zero, as you mentioned, emission by 2050 and halve carbon emissions by 2030. This is our timeline.
Very impressive. Again, it's one of the things I always say, that one of the reasons we need non-state actors, subnational governments in the room, is that some subnational governments, like your city, like Cairo, are significantly bigger than some national governments. Let me quickly turn to Phuthi. Phuthi, you have deep experience in, pass the microphone, with different forms of investment, currently as CEO of Naspers. And I know that you're doing lots of innovative new business models for investment, and particularly in the areas of investing in adaptation. And I'd love you to give us some examples, because one of the things that I am getting really bored of is people telling me that there's no possibility of investing in adaptation. I think it must be false, because we know that an adaptive world has a much more thriving economy. We just need to innovate. So tell us a little bit about some of the innovations to drive investment in adaptation.
Thank you very much for that, Nigel. I think I'll start off just by just sharing a quote, and I think I misquoted Rita Thunberg, what she said, that we're all in the same crisis, but on different boats. And the reality is that when you look at young people on the African continent, that's where you see that some people are on different boats. We are not all on the same boat. And so, as a business that is operating over 100 markets and impacting 1.5 billion people, we have seen the importance of being able to impact the youth. And so if I look at a country like South Africa, where unemployment is currently sitting at 61%, you need to do something in terms of impacting the young people of South Africa. And so, in terms of adaptation, we have looked at ways in which we can impact young people. As a digital business, for starters, we have said that we'll provide access to digital skilling and access to employment for young people. And then we're also providing access to capital for young people to be able to invest into their businesses. And here's what we see. You see a business like a business called Sweep South, where it was started by a young woman with a PhD from one of the top universities globally, who decided that rather than focusing on her area that she had studied, which was the sciences, that she was going to focus on an area that was most difficult in South Africa, which was unemployment. And today she's provided access to employment to over 30,000 women through starting this business, a digital business, which is providing access to virtual. And, you know, another is a business which is run by a young African man, and, you know, he is also providing access to educate, and he has done so now for a number, over 30,000 young people. So, you know, when you are able to provide support to businesses that are run by young people, you're able to actually create opportunities for them that they never would have seen before. And then they can start to engage with the world in a manner that is meaningful, and be able to sit here and see how they can ensure that they can contribute to the world in a meaningful manner, because they are able to now do so. And so that is what we focus on, to be short.
Fantastic. You just remind me of one. It's a truism that Africa is a young continent, right? The median age is like 19 or something, where it's 39 in my country, but that means there's a huge dynamism and a thirst. So investing in those young entrepreneurs who can provide solutions is great to hear. Thank you. Let's turn to Anna. You're working at the forefront of climate advocacy, leading to the protection of some very big ecosystems in the Philippines. So from the perspective of the Masungi Georeserve, I'd love to come back to this point of collaboration, how, you know, civil society has a role to sometimes hold the mirror up, protest, tell, scold, as Minister said, but also to collaborate. Tell us a little bit how, in your example, civil society is collaborating with government and some of the projects you're working on.
My climate awakening really happened when I was about 18 years old, when Typhoon Katsana came in. 600 plus lives were lost, more than $1 billion in damages, lots of floods and landslides that have inundated towns and cities. And while our conservation project, which was already running for 20 years, was already protected to an extent, we still have the mountains surrounding us really abused by illegal activities and land trafficking. And in 2011, these same mountains were declared protected by national government. Actually, just another layer of protection yet again. But very good to have, you know? It was declared protected by government. And unfortunately, the forest kept on dwindling. So in 2008, the Manila Observatory reported that the forest cover was at 19%. And come 2021, it went down to an 11%. So in 2017, when then Secretary Gina Lopez invited us and challenged us to participate in the reforestation of this area, we took the challenge. Then the Masungi Geopark project was born, and this is basically a youth-led initiative spanning 3,000 hectares or so. That is all about landscape restoration, which is a nature-based solution. So in this project, we're doing things at no cost to government. We are financing it through low-volume, nature-based, conservation-based experiences. We were meant to collaborate with this with the national level directly, which was done basically to overcome the number and the multitude of vested interests on the ground. And we've seen this really mobilize and get to implement activities. I think the main example I'd like to provide would be Macquarie interest that came in 2020. So all of a sudden we woke up and about 500 hectares of the watershed were suddenly fenced off. We found out that about 1,000 hectares had quarry agreements on it. And because of that, we launched a campaign called the Save Masungi Movement. And the Save Masungi Movement was able to put together signatures from 20,000 people including prominent personalities and indigenous elders. It was able to create a coalition of 80 organizations to mobilize for the cancellation of these agreements, collaborate with core mayors and downstream communities to support watershed education, and through continuing advocacies, educated more than 200 government officials in replicating the work that we do. And more than 20,000 people basically having directly participating in the conservation work. So this is basically how we have, in general, have been able to contribute in Masungi.
Great. Look, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm inspired. These are 3 examples of leadership in very different circumstances. A massive city with all the leverage of a huge budget and 14 million people. Finance that through the supporting the passion of young entrepreneurs reaches hundreds of thousands of lives. And really sophisticated collaboration with multi-stakeholders that protects culture and ecosystems and creates employment. So there's so much evidence of this kind of leadership here. I really encourage you, read the yearbook of climate action, go to the Marrakesh Partnership thematic events, go to the Futures Labs, the implementation labs. Let's make sure that we keep building the dynamism and building hope from each other so that we dare to make those bold commitments and then be held accountable for them as we move forward in the spirit of implementation. So let's have a big hand for our 3 months leaders. Well, should I pass you to close? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Thank you everyone who participated here today. Thank you to all organizations, businesses, investors, CSOs, philanthropies, everyone who sent speakers to give these inspirational hope that there is a way forward, there is a solution. And I can only say thanks, of course, to the 2 able climate champions. Most importantly, as presidency of COP27, this type of event, this type of activism and enthusiasm is the perfect manifestation of what we have labeled an implementation COP. This is the reality. We have the negotiations, we've moved from negotiation, hopefully to the implementation phase and action on the ground. So thank you all for these types of contributions, and this is the way forward that we all aspire to. Once again, thank you on behalf of Minister Shoukry, who had to leave earlier, for all of your contributions, and keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
That's nice.